Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania, where top creators and founders build the future of financial technologies and the next generation of sustainable innovations. Acting as a dynamic ecosystem, we provide space for networking, expertise sharing, and cooperation, enabling and contributing to the success stories of the finance, technology, and innovation sectors. During the past years, our hub has established a leading position as the home of fintech and core place for fintech community.
Hello and good morning. So welcome to this Rocket event where we will be discussing how to not lose your license. And I'm very happy that we have collected a very interesting group of participants today. So let me introduce our speakers and participants. We will have Rūta Merkevičiūtė, who is head of the Payments Market Supervision Division in the Bank of Lithuania. We have Audrius Radišauskas, the founder and CEO of FinLibrary, the company which provides fintech companies with resources and advice since 2013. And Audrius has experience both on banking and on fintech side. We have Ieva Dosinaitė, partnered at law firm Alex Valiūnas. And Alex Valiūnas is probably one of the top firms in Lithuania where you should go if you want to get help on licensing. And finally, Darius Kulikauskas, CEO at Pervesk, and also he is a partner at Bankera. And Pervesk is a licensed electronic money institution which provides services, payment services, both to private individuals and companies. And I am Paulius Tarbūnas, I'm heading FinTech Lithuania. We are an association which unites fintech ecosystem participants. So in the beginning, we will have two presentations by Rūta and Audrius, and then we will kick off with a discussion in this group, and also we will be able to take your questions. So please post your questions during the event, and I will try to incorporate them into our discussion. Event will be recorded, so in case you missed the live stream, then you will be able anyway to go back and check our discussion. So without further ado, then let me give the floor to Rūta, and let's hear what the regulator has to say about this. Thanks.
Thank you, Paulius. Thank you for introducing me. It's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about this really interesting and challenging theme. So instead of posing this question in my presentation, maybe I would like to talk more about fintech and enhancing compliance culture, and then to come back to the question and to the answer. Just so the start is for everyone, for all the e-money and payment institution, is that you are so about getting a license, and what's happening when the license is issued. So it happens that you are becoming a member of the licensed and regulated community. So welcome to regulated world. And how does this world look like from Lithuania point of view, from Bank of Lithuania point of view? So truly, of course, when we talk about think tanks in Lithuania, they usually mean e-money and payment institution. And over the last 5 years, the growth, or not 5 or 4 years, the growth of them really was enormous. It was tripled comparing to the numbers we had in 2016. So these are the last data what we had recently published, that in Q3 we had 121 e-money and payment institution license. Of course, the majority of institutions are e-money institutions because the business models are usually related to e-wallet provision, but I will talk to this further. Among other licensed fintech, of course, we have banks and 5 special banks, And usually when we talk about fintechs, we have in mind also P2P crowdfunding platforms. But today, as being a head of payment market supervision, I will talk more on e-money and payments institutions. So what we have from e-money and payment institution, what kind of services they provide? There is a really very detailed slide, but what I wanted to bring on in the left part, you would see the payment service provided, and the mass majority, like 90% of the services where e-money and payment institution they provide, it's related, like I said, to e-wallets. It's like e-wallets where payment accounts where you usually can transfer payments, receive payments, and of course other e-money and payment institutions, they relate their services to remittance services. It is usual Western Union model where you send money to the payee and to the beneficiary of your funds. What we saw in 2019, and we had evaluated how many number of employees e-money and payment institution have. It had 605, and in total 545 were working in Lithuania. We took into account only e-money institution and payments institutions who are the main activity of them are really only in financial services. We didn't count, a payment institution, e-money institution like Lietuvos Post Office, Lietuvos Paštas, because it's the main activity of them is not providing payments. We also saw, and when we usually talk with the entities, that in order to start your activity, it takes time. And at times, it's about 9 months. So it's usual thing, then a company comes and say, we will start just the first day after the license issued. We all look at this quite carefully. Why? Because we have the statistics and we have the data that we rely on. And like I said, the activities of institutions are focused on service related to the management of payment accounts. When we look to the payment institution and to the landscape from the customers where they reside, so most of the customers of e-money and payment institutions, they reside in European Union, and the transacting 67% of payments. When we saw the rapid growth in payments, and nowadays it's about 25 billion euros are transacting in e-money institution, and the clientele is really the Europe and the rest of the world. So when we come back to the regulated world, the first initial step as a Bank of Lithuania, we welcome you, we welcome e-money institution, and this is the example of letter already sent. It's a really long one, but it's really about letting us know you better. And how do we usually know e-money and payment institutions better is really by collecting the data on financial forecast and financial data, not only forecast, but the actual data, AML data related, operational incidents data, IT and cyber security, statistical data, data of compliance of clients and other data. I remember once someone said it's only statistics, but really it's not about statistics. It's really the thing that let us know you better, really understand what kind of entity you are. So what kind of entity and the focus itself, what kind of maturity you have. And when we look from the Bank of Lithuania perspective, what is maturity for us is really the key elements. It's really everything starts from the head of the company, from their shareholders. So for us, it's very important. And what is showing the maturity is the governance and compliance culture. So it doesn't mean only that you have to have the task and the purpose to get all the money, but really to have all the clients, but really with the growth of the activities, the compliance has to stand side by side. And by getting this information from reports, by looking to what is going on in the company, we can assess that and can assess your maturity from this point of view. Another thing that is very important and the key element is capital adequacy is equals to financial health. By granting a license, we are granting our liability to say that you are financially healthy, that you are a company who are not, is able to fail, but really we are here as the Bank of Lithuania to help you not to fail. Therefore, capital adequacy and having enough money is very important core factor in these entities. Another thing is e-money and payment institution, they deal with clients' funds. And the regime in EU is about that e-money institutions, they are different from banks. Therefore, the requirements of prudential requirements are different because there's a guarantee from EU law that client funds are always safe because they have the legal tender to be safe and they have to be kept in a certain credit institution, in a certain accounts. Therefore, safety warrant that e-money and payment institution have, they have to have this, and they have to have is like an it's not negotiable, because if it's negotiable, so all the concept of e-money and payment institution just they fails, and this kind of entities, therefore they cannot then to be in Europe or to be a legal tender or to be someone that we can trust as a client. And of course, other things is related to risk management. One of them, if you have a license, if you said that you are doing, what are you going to do? So keep your word and do as you said. So it's important that you provide activities within license issued. If you are a payment institution, so you should act as a payment institution. If you want to act as an e-money institution and you have not a license for that, so you firstly have to come to Bank of Lithuania to have this license, instead of starting to be a money institution and say it's quite the same, but it's not the same. Another thing is, like I said, very crucial, and I guess most of our fintech ecosystem are talking about AML, there is financial risk management. They are talking really about the fines that we issued, because the fines in this field is the biggest fine. So there are a lot of talks, but like I said, it's one of the components of fintech maturity, what we assess, but not the only one that you have to stick on. The other ones is very important too. And last but not least is resilience to IT cyber risk. And of course, sometimes we just feel that fintech itself, it's IT product, they are working in this digital environment. So we feel by default this kind of resilience to IT cyber risks are very important and one of the key factors just in order to start the activity. And the question is, how is the best way to get this maturity? Because it's very related to the having license or not. And I couldn't not, say other kind of words that the words that by Jane Austen, it's like self-knowledge is the first step to maturity. And if we talked about the financial industry, what is self-knowledge is really knowing who are you, what kind of activity and what kind of risk you could take. So from getting back to the slide, if we are talking about AML, terrorist financial risk management. So knowing myself what kind of risk I can deal, I am going to serve the customers that I understand. So I guess it's the main ingredient in all what a financial institution does. And if this kind of philosophy, this kind of culture is within the company, that I know myself, I know what kind of risk I can take. If I have more risk management, I engage in more risky field, but it's not about like, first I go, I go and grow, but the risk management comes with later on. Because in this case, then we have this kind of situation. Like by December 2020, we have already 62 enforcement measures imposed, including 5 license withdrawals, versus 1 manager suspension, 24 fines, 17 warnings. So the statistics is about the enforcement measures. It's not about how many entities were penalized. It's more like one entity could get 2 enforcement measures. So like you see that the growth of fintech sectors in the right hand, we saw in yellow that inspections, reviews, analysis were growing too. Like last year, we performed 23 inspections or analysis. It was 12 enforcement measures adopted. This year, it's equal, like 24 inspections were done and 25 enforcement measures were taken. And if we looked at the penalties imposed and the sum in euros, so today we have already 800,000 euros. In a couple of years ago, it was a bigger sum, but it was related to one entity who, if will want to talk about, will be able to talk maybe today. And then you see the attitude towards from Bank of Lithuania that as we grow, as our fintech sector grow, the tension is getting bigger. And like I said, if you self-aware of your company, this kind of things are not going to happen. The enforcement measures are not going to taken. It's only applicable, like in this picture, to the companies who is kitten but sees as a lion and overestimates their capabilities to deal with the risk. Capabilities maybe to omit some kind of or be incompliant and say we could be in compliant for some time, but it doesn't work like this in financial services. And I guess the statistics on the enforcement measures, they show. Next year, we also are going to be more attentive and because the aim of us is really to have a mature sector. And here is some examples of the companies of the publicly available information where you could see our attention to the core things, what I have already indicated. It's a capital requirements. Some of the companies were like 7 or so companies where the penalties, not penalties, but supervisory measures were imposed. This is example of a company where the license were revoked due to the really systemic and serious violation. One of the violations were like really operating as a e-money, though having only a payment institution license. And we have some other cases related to non-compliance with AML requirements, just this of the last year, but this year we have 3 or 4 supervisory measures really adopted to the companies. So by then, like I said, finalizing my presentation, so how not to lose license, I guess the aim is for the companies to be the best version of themselves, to really deliver the best quality, because as a Bank of Lithuania, we have really a dream that anyone who could say that you are licensed from Lithuania, they would say, oh, so you are very good because you have a compliance culture, you enhancing compliance, you are very good quality. So this is the dream, and I really welcome everyone to go hand in hand to this our strategic dream, and let's create the ecosystem of fintechs that we should not really need to pose the questions like this, so how not to lose license, really maybe the question should be how to enhance compliance culture more and more and to be the best version as we are. So thank you, and this is my presentation for now.
Okay, thank you, Ruta, very much. It was very interesting. Before we jump to another subject, then I'd like to ask one short question. I think on slide 5, you mentioned that 67% of the payments are coming from EU and 33% from non-EU. I'm just wondering, United Kingdom, was it in the statistics still as EU or non-EU?
We are living today, it's like 16th of December. UK is still EU, so it was in the statistics.
In the statistics, okay,
yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, so then let's go to the next presenter, Audrius. The floor is yours. You are muted, my friend.
Okay, I hope this is better now.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So glad to be here, and thank you, Ruta, for an insightful presentation. I will try to look at this from a little bit different angle, from the kitchen of the fintech companies, mostly that I've seen around, working with them, helping them in various situations. So I think we can agree and also see that from Ruta's presentation that keeping the license is a lot about self-awareness, and I could also add it's probably a lot about resource management. So I tend to look at it in 3 stages. So usually fintech companies first they apply for the license, and this is where we see a lot of resources being used from legal companies and consulting companies, because this is where we are building actually meeting the requirements coming from the Bank of Lithuania, and there's a lot of templates floating around. Sometimes people see very similar policies and procedures in different fintech companies, and I think this is natural. So there's little actually resources at this point coming from the fintech companies. Once you start building and operationalizing the company, this is where you engage more internal resources and try to live up to the promise that you've made to the regulators. So you have more ownership still. You are relying on a lot of consulting companies. You are building your IT infrastructure, so third parties, and so on. And when you start running the company, it's mostly on you. Yet still, if we compare to the traditional banks, fintech companies tend to outsource more. But this is a lot on still. I would say this is a lot of on the shoulders of internal resources. And I would say this is where a lot of problems could start, talking about keeping the license, not losing the license. Because it happens that fintech companies overestimate their capabilities to live up to the promise that they've made to the bank. So there's a lot of policies in the company, but to make it work, to make sure there's audit trail, and so on. This is quite a bit of work, and this requires resources. I'm not going to touch the point where licenses could be withdrawn voluntarily, because sometimes it happens that you don't go fully live, and I think within a year your license is revoked. So that is not the subject of this presentation. I also would like to point out that when it comes to inspection, I don't know, sometimes maybe it's a perception, but the inspection really takes a photograph of your past activities. So it is extremely important to go live with your activities already fully compliant. So it's like a little bit like driver's license. You could get a ticket for your past driving activities. So it's like a camera always filming you. And again, comes back to my point: having a good audit trail in the company is a must. And one more maybe thing to point out is that during the inspection, there's an increase of resources needed for the fintech company, because you're still running the business, and then you have to work with the regulator, and that can also have an impact on your could say license, defending your license in the company. So that's something that companies could think about, how to balance those resources, and sometimes maybe even get help during the inspection. Some of the figures that I have are a little bit higher to what Ruta was presenting, because I think that's coming from the site of Bank of Lithuania, where I counted penalties. And I also looked at the bank's penalties, so we can see that there's a quite number of penalties to payment institutions and electronic money institutions. No inspection so far on a specialized banking licenses. As Ruta mentioned, there's 5 of them today. There's quite a few in the pipeline. But I do think this is coming. It will come. And the message, I guess, to the specialized banking licenses would be to really make sure you are in shape. And this is a different game. Specialized banking licenses are allowing much more to the financial institutions, and the requirements are much more stringent, almost like a traditional bank. You know, even though maybe like some electronic money licenses would like to upgrade themselves, the message would be this is a new game. This is much more requirements and resources needed from the fintech company to live up to it. So what can I say from my experience? And I think Ruta already mentioned. So the fastest way to lose your license is probably to breach the your given license mandate. So, for example, if you have a payment institution license and you act as a electronic money license, or you find another way how to breach your license mandate, it seems from looking at the historical data, it seems like this is more or less guaranteed to lose a license. When we talk about intentionally and repeatedly providing false information to the regulator, yeah, I think this, and this is up to a discussion to the group, but I think it has also a lot to do how you provide information to the Bank of Lithuania. Are you transparent? Are you providing enough information to make a judgment by the regulator that your internal control system, that your risk management, compliance, everything is working in order? And if you do this repeatedly incorrectly, I think this could have a major impact on your license. Then if we talk about AML area, this is also a tricky one. We see large banks sometimes having enormous issues and with money laundering situations, yet their licenses are not revoked. Huge penalties, huge attention, maybe because they are major players in their markets. But this is also an interesting topic. But I can probably just recommend to fintech companies really shape up on this one, and there's a lot of discussions and efforts in the market. And the last one is probably also a good one, is a multiple breaches in demonstrating that your internal risk management, your control environment is not working, which basically means your car is not running. Therefore, you should not be on the road. So that's probably the key aspects that I've seen and wanted to share with you what could help you lose the license. Now, what I think is, and again, it's a subjective one, why this happens. I've seen, for example, that one is that shareholders, they are not taking compliance matters seriously, and they're focusing fully on a business and innovation. So if risk management is secondary for you, then again all your resources are put into the development of the business, and here you go, you can stumble on serious issues. The other one is that sometimes these companies are quite small, and shareholders are deeply involved in running the business and not necessarily understanding all the details of risk management, and therefore this could also result in some serious issues. The other one is cultural communication. And that one is quite interesting because we see fintechs coming from different cultures, maybe having their headquarters in another country, and now establishing an office in Lithuania, and then appointing the local management. So sometimes these cultural miscommunications could also lead to serious issues in the company. So seen it happen. Pressure to become profitable, that goes kind of without saying. There's a lot of pressure to as soon as possible to become profitable, and that can drive some lack of attention to risk management areas. And maybe last but not least one I wanted to share is that, again, the shareholders, the knowledge coming from other regulatory jurisdictions could also be a little bit of an issue here, because they've seen how other regulators operate, and the perception could be, well, if that was not an issue in that country, then it should not be here. But that's not necessarily the case. So I think, if you are getting the license from the Bank of Lithuania, you should fully know what the requirements are within that country, and comply with that. So last one here is how this really happens. So first of all, not enough resources after the build phase. So again, I think I'm coming back to the same point where, during the application process, you don't need a lot of internal resources, then you need a bit more in operationalizing it. And then when you go live, all of a sudden you realize that you don't have enough competencies to comply with everything that you promised. The other thing is resources. Again, staff is where you get the employees, and that sometimes is cost driven. So hiring some junior staff that have some experience but maybe don't see the big picture, could be coming from a shared service center where you've been doing just part of the process, and you don't see the entire picture. So then you could miss, during the learning process, you could miss some of important details. As I mentioned, fintech companies rely quite a bit on outsourcing, and I think this is good and great, because the need of resources is not always as steady, so you have spikes. But relying too much on legal companies, which will help you with the policies, is okay, but they will not run the business for you. They will not run your risk management processes, and you do need to demonstrate to the regulator that you know your stuff. And this reliance too much on legal and consulting companies could be an issue. And the other one is where management is under a lot of pressure from shareholders, again, to become maybe more profitable, be lean, manage the costs. If you're not able to stand up, then it becomes an issue. And to close my presentation, my advice would be, again, this is a resource management game. Make sure you assess your situation properly. You know which risks you are exposed to. Play a safe game. Mitigate the risks, because the loss of the license will remove shareholders and the top management of the company from the map of financial institutions. So good luck to everyone, and I really look forward to a discussion.
Okay, thank you, Audrius. So we have 25 minutes remaining for the discussion, so let's kick it off. And then I will shoot questions. I will ask participants to be as short, as precise as possible when answering. And let me start by asking Darius. Dario, you have a certain experience with this licensing area, and you had some kind of early incident early in the company's history. Maybe you could tell us a little bit. So what happened? What did you do? How did you solve the problem? And what did you learn?
Thank you, Paulus, for the question. Do I have that experience? I'm starting. I don't recall anything happening in our history. But on a more serious note, yes, indeed. In the very early stages of our company, just kicking off with our operations, basically only 6 or so months after acquiring electronic money license, we were faced with an on-site inspection. So even though you asked us to be very precise and brief in our answers, I think it still needs a little bit of context, So just to understand how it looks from the market participant's eyes, when this suddenly happens, when you are in this very, very early infancy of your company. And what actually Audrey mentioned is very applicable in those stages. It was not an issue in the UK. So of course you do look at the other participants, and since you are not that much experienced, you tend to copy what they do, and this can always happen. Not always, not necessarily, but it can often happen in a very amateurish way, to put it mildly. So. A lot of companies that don't get under, that stay below the radar for in the eyes of the Bank of Lithuania, because they are not big enough, they don't have enough operations. They can get away with hiring, staff, just to put it in Audrey's words, with fragmented experience. And then, since they build the history of operating for some time, others will look up to them and say, okay, they are doing this that way. We can just copy their approach. So this brings me to one of the main points that I would like to make today, that in order to not lose your license, you have to first have a very competent and experienced staff. And you cannot, just try to save money on that one. It will cost you a lot, but in the long term, that's the only way to become profitable as soon as possible. Because you can in a very short term, you can make a lot of money without proper compliance. But then you have to make sure that you will be able to offset the fine that you are going to get, if that is going to be possible at all. Now, of course, our experience was also associated with some misconceptions on our side. We did not had a lot of time and opportunity to communicate with our approach and to explain our business model to the Bank of Lithuania before, ramping up our operations. And when the inspection started, we thought to ourselves, okay, Bank of Lithuania, at least, in the public images, that they are a friendly regulator. At least it was that way in those days. Of course, their attitude shifted quite a lot. I think all of us in the market can feel that, the shift happened during the recent years. But back in the day, it seemed, that they are going to coach us. So just as Ruta said, all the fintechs have to become the best version of themselves. What this means, it sounds like, something that, a life coach would tell you in a coaching session. So we thought, we will use this opportunity. We will ask, the Bank of Lithuania employees, that are already on our premises, if we have doubts regarding one or another decision. The truth is, it was a very naive to expect, that this is going to be a consultation. If Bank of Lithuania is on your premises, it means that they have serious concerns. Even if you don't agree with them, but it means that, from their perspective, there's something going on. And if you are, just going to be asking around, that's not going to lead you anywhere, and it can actually aggravate their concerns. So my second advice and my second point would be, you have to be very active with your communication, especially if you're running a very specific business model. And very specific business models are are a usual thing in the EMI's world. We are not all PayPals. We are not all, just trying to be usual banks. Even though there is some space, just to increase competition in those areas. But the thing is that most of the fintechs, they are trying to build something unique, trying to create their own niche, or trying to go after a market segment that has been overlooked. And this is often an area that you are trying to explore yourself as it happens, as you are doing business. But it is as equally or even more unfamiliar territory to the Bank of Lithuania, because for them, they are just spectators of what's happening, and something unfamiliar to them is happening. So my advice is, and how we changed our approach after our little adventure in 2018, is that we are being very active in communicating. And of course, a lot of market participants are competing for the attention of Bank of Lithuania, and it would be, a slight understatement to say that they are a bit overwhelmed by questions, by licensing requests, and whatnot. The thing is that still you have to understand that, if you are not going to explain your business model to the Bank of Lithuania, and if you are going to reach that point when Bank of Lithuania actually has to ask or request information from you, it's probably a bit too late. So I would say, don't be afraid to be a little bit, pain in one place for Bank of Lithuania, and try to be persistent and ask them your questions. Just the other day, I had a call from a colleague, a CEO of another EMI, and we were discussing. He was actually, he knew that we as a company, Pervas, we do contact Bank of Lithuania from time to time without fear or shame, to sound stupid or to reveal ourselves as having doubts regarding some of the decisions. And the main question that he had, whether he should contact Bank of Lithuania regarding an agent authorization procedure. My advice was, I had a chance to become that coach, that's cheering for him to become the best version of himself. My advice was, go ahead and ask. If anything, Bank of Lithuania will be more than glad to help. And when the issues arise down the road, in your process, you will have discussed things, and they will be shown in a different light. So I think I deviated a bit from the original question, but I think this deviation was in the right direction, and I hope this answer is useful.
Thanks, Darius. One more question to you, but please answer very shortly. I know that you have argued the central bank's decision to impose the fine on your company in the court. How does that impact your nowadays relationship with the central bank?
I think Bank of Lithuania takes a very professional approach to this. Mm-hmm. I have not felt in any instance that our decision to dispute the fine and other sanctions have impacted our future possibilities or business models. I think for the Bank of Lithuania, and Ruta probably can comment on that, what matters is if your current situation and your future plans are properly aligned with what's possible and what is asked from you in legal requirements.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. So let's move ahead, and then I have a question for Yeva. Legal companies are the entry point to the market. So to say that normally fintechs, if they want to establish themselves in Lithuania, they normally approach law firm to ask for help with licensing. And I'm always wondering, when working with potential fintech companies and license companies, do you see kind of in advance how good they will be in actually, being compliant or sticking to their business plan? You know, how do you see that?
Well, unfortunately, we are not oracles, to see the future, but of course, certain signs can be seen already in the very initial stage. So I would distinguish maybe 3 moments when you can, measure or understand the level of readiness of the particular client or investor. So the first one would be our KYC process. As we are also obliged entities, so before starting to work with the client, we need to onboard the client. So the general conscious understanding, knowledge about KYC process as such, the quality of KYC package of the client already shows certain, information. Of course, before going to onboarding process, we are doing sort of, Google search and general, screening of a potential, of the company to be potential our client. And if we find some kind of, doubtful information regarding especially reputation, because this is extremely important, not for us as a law firm, but also for the regulator if we are just looking, long-term relations with the client. So then, of course, there are some kind of red flags that you can, identify already before the KYC. But in general, just, to understand the client's readiness. So yes, KYC process is one of the very good filters to understand whether there is, some kind of, whether it will be, sort of relatively easy journey with a client, or it will cost certain more efforts, because it will, you'll have to do not only direct work, but also educational part of the work to explain the client why it is important and how to make this. So if we are assuming, KYC goes smoothly, so the second point where you can, again, test the readiness is preparatory stage. And I would distinguish a business plan. When we get, of course, business plan, we are also, a lot of making push for the client to work together with local consultants on preparing a final business plan. But once you get the business plan, already you can see, whether in general the model is viable, whether, or it's, shallow sort of, document, just, tick the box exercise in order to get the license. And the last, I would say, and not the least, I would say, it is the general attitude of the client, whether the client already during the licensing process puts the efforts to start already on implementation side of the project. Because if before, I would say 2 years ago, it was very, I would say 100% of the clients were just doing, let's do, one step at a time. Let's get a license, then we will see how to implement this model. And that's, of course, in reality, it caused a lot of, I would say stress, costs for the clients when they realize that what they put in the papers, it is hardly, or it doesn't make, sense, business sense to make it, live. So this is very, important when you're preparing documentation like this formal side to test it with the reality. And therefore, we're always, trying to send the message quite strongly, and we're pushy on that. When you're reading the policies, when you're reading the whole package, you need to understand not what is written, formally, but you need to understand from practical side how you will implement. Because, that's very important that you cannot put your whole documentation file on the table and to implement the business model completely in different way. So that's no-go. And now what is the really good news is that I would say 50% of the clients are just already doing certain, steps in order to get, live as soon as possible after the license, it's issued, without, naive expectations that, the license, when it's given next day, you can go to the market. So that needs to be, prepared as well. So that's the tendency that we see. Okay.
Thank you, Eva. I think that brings me to my next question, and I guess the question goes to Audrius, at least to start with. I mean, I was surprised that neither you, Audrius, nor Ruta mentioned that one of the reasons why I think we've seen some licenses revoked was actually that the company did not start activities as indicated in their business plan, which was presented for licensing. Why do you think, first of all, can you confirm that? And second, why do you think that happens? Why the company bothers to go through all the complicated licensing process only not to start activities then later?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I slightly mentioned that the cases where companies go through the application process and then within a year they don't kick off their actual business. I decided to remove that out of the scope because that's kind of a different game where we're not talking about being incapable of meeting some regulatory requirements. I haven't seen examples where they did not initiate because they are not able to meet the requirements. I only liaise with some companies where their business model completely changed because it's time consuming to get the license, and the market has changed in a way where their products were no longer so competitive, so they had to rethink their game completely, how to position themselves in the market. So then they decided, I guess, to do it in another approach. But maybe Ruta has seen more.
Maybe you could expand a little bit. So how do you, in general, evaluate the business plan which is presented to you during the licensing process and viability of this plan? Does the market really change so fast that during the licensing process, the business model changes? Is that the real reason?
Okay, so truly it's like Yeva started and Audrius supplemented. When you have a plan, so our aim is really, for a regulatory point of view, is really to see if you can walk the talk, how to say. So it should not be artificial, it should be the real plan. So how we evaluate is really from practical point of view, as we have in our bag or more than, 100 license and more than other applications apply to us. So we really understand what's the reality. And from the first initial part, then we see the plan, we can say if you are dreaming, over dreaming, if you are too pessimistic or you are realistic. So it's very obvious from the first sight and very obvious if you understand where you're going to the market. So the thing is really, this triggers us, and that's why we're asking about who are the people who will work for you, and that is really because these are the people who should understand at least this kind of market and where are you going, where you kind of incomes will come. And the cases that you mentioned about the license that were revoked due to not inactivity of the companies, now we see more and more the companies are more realistic, or the companies are coming for license, like Yeva said, more prepared. And it's not the case that they are not starting to prepare because they are like sleeping, all dormant companies. It's more that maybe it takes some time to get prepared. So of course we don't revoke the license. And more or less, I guess, the companies whose license were revoked, they revoked. Another point, I guess, very important for assessing the plan is the risk appetite. And it's related to ML. And the bigger risk appetite you have, the bigger knowledge we really expect from you. And if you said, and you cannot say that, from Iran, there is a bigger risk, and I don't see what's the risk with Iran, or I don't know, with South America. So, maybe you want stepping to the field that you don't understand, or maybe it's too obvious for me to understand that there is a difference. So this kind of things happens, and I guess the licensing is getting through licensing. We really have a good filter. Then afterwards, it's supervision.
May I just add one quick one? Just came to my mind. A little bit has to do with what you mentioned. So if it's important that you live up to your business plan. So companies write really nice business plans and present it to the Bank of Lithuania. And based on that, then there is a license issue. So for example, if you're going for the payment institution license, and then you describe how you're going to do that, then I think you should really make sure that in reality you implement that. But then in reality, if it happens so that customers are holding money for longer than, let's say, 48 hours, right? And the money is just sitting in their accounts, that is not within the payment institution license mandate. So now you are breaching the license, and I'm coming to the same point. That is the fastest way of losing your license.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Audrus. Ruta, one more question to you. So what I hear that most likely all those most of the enforcement measures which were applied to the companies during this past period was basically due to the compliance breaches in one way or another, right? So I'm curious, you know, what's your take on this? Is it because companies lack internal controls or competence, or is it mainly because they want to walk on the borderline with risks, you know, and they're willing to take more risks?
You know, I was posing really the question for me like 2 years ago, what's happening? Like you said, we want to be partner, but if you step on the compliance of the law, we cannot say friendly, it's not a breach, it's a breach, and you are breaching very important steps. So I think what I wanted to talk, it's everything starts from the governance and from the shareholder or CEO who is showing the way how to go. And it's then cascades, internal controls, safeguarding client funds, everything cascades from the top, how you see the vision of the company. And therefore, the next year is really shifted as a regulator. We are really focusing to the governance. And I guess from the patterns that you see, we are also enforcing more responsibilities for company CEOs and taking them accountable.
Okay.
So that, because they have to feel the responsibility we're taking.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Let me now take a slightly different direction and let's discuss a little bit trends. And my question is to Yeva, since you are, like I said, entry point for many companies when they need to do something with a license. Do you see already any trend that, for example, well-established electronic money institutions are coming to you asking to start conversion of the license to special purpose bank or to full banking license? And is that a very simple, straightforward process, or?
Completely not straightforward process. Yes, indeed, this trend is already this year. I would say every second biggest European EMI is considering for specialized banking license. And Lithuania here with this initiative implemented by the Bank of Lithuania, which is, I would say, a huge step forward, which brings us in the front lines above other regulators, is especially the specialized banking license. So because what is the need? The need of expand the product. So if you're providing payments, so what is very related, it's lending. For lending, you need to have a capital. If you're EMI, as we already and Ruta clearly, comprehensively explained, you cannot dispose of clients' funds. So who will, fund the lending activities? So that's, like natural answer is to have a banking license in order to dispose clients' funds. But where is still the perception from the clients, especially even with those who are carrying out the license business or with a EMI license, is that they underestimate the whole process. One is, perception or myth or false understanding is that it's something very similar, maybe a bit of complicated, more complicated than EMI, but sort of we can use the same templates, the same policies, and, just change the name that it's not EMI, it's just a bank, and here we go, we have a full package. And this, perception you can see already in the very initial stage. So yes, we are trying to have at least few calls, long ones, just to explain in very detail what it costs for the client to become a bank. I even reluctant to call it conversion or upgrade of the license, because it's totally different way, totally different, process. So that's what we are trying still, not to fight, but trying to give the clients a priori some kind of, clear, realistic, expectations, because we already had some experience when, the client really underestimated what it costs to become a bank. And just in the second part of the whole licensing process, they realize that it's not the same as EMI. That's not the same what they were doing for a few years already. So it's completely different. So this is, completely different. But yes, specialized banking license rather than traditional banking license is one of those most wanted paths or licenses that the current financial institutions want to have on the table.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Eva. Okay, I see that our time is up, but if you guys agree, let's take a few more questions. Let's go a little bit over time because it's really an interesting discussion. And I'd like to go back a little bit to AMF and counter-terrorist financing issue. We have one question from Alexandre Pinot, and he's asking, and the question most likely goes to Ruta, are there any plans that Bank of Lithuania will shift a little bit this AML CFT supervision model from strictly a review of financial participants' compliance towards more consideration of the effectiveness of AML CFT programs?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is very, very good question. And as a fintechs developer, so regulators are also supervisors are also improving, developing. The thing is, what I could assure, some of the things are just written rule-based, that in law, so we cannot be flexible on that. Only the things that related to risk-based approach, of course, we are learn how it's the best effective could be, or best result could be delivered. This kind of things could be adapted. And I guess our shift is really not making different, but improving with our experience with what's happening. Another thing that I didn't mention, but I will mention, we just recently introduced our automating risk-based model on AML, on financial risk. So really it enables us to have some kind of tools to assess the risk differently, not only from paper work.
Okay, thanks. Slightly different question, and I want to ask Darius of your opinion. Recently, the Bank of Lithuania has said that we are establishing AML Competence Center, but at least at this stage, fintech companies were not invited to participate. Why do you think that happened? Do we have a chance to squeeze in later to this AML Competence Center, or what do we do?
Well, I hope that we do have a chance to still squeeze in that good company. And to be completely frank with you, I was really disappointed that we did not even receive an invite. It would be a completely different thing to be rejected, with a like a blanket reason, like we have a lot of participants, we don't have any room for you now. But it was an issue of not being invited at all. And the problem there is that current participants are entrenched banks with a very conservative business models, with a very conservative customer base, with a lot of resident customers, with very few non-resident model customers. And the EMIs, the ones that did not get invited, and some of them, if you take their size, they are comparable to the smallest banks that did get invited. They do have a lot of know-how and a lot of competence that would be very valuable to share in that context, in that company. And I don't think that's a very good way to manage this process, because a lot of good thoughts might not even surface just because they were silenced at the very beginning.
Ruta, do you think we will get invited at some point?
I think we are talking about different invitation. One I think is the founders of the central competence central. So the founders are the ones who gives money. So I sometimes people say it's good I have to pay. But it vice versa. But the invitation, to be on the same table is already here for all the e-money and payment institution. In it's about not who is the founding partners, really. It's about the themes that you will bring and what kind of outcome you will bring. And of course, what Darius is saying, that maybe banks are more conservative. So it's not about the founders who has to decide what kind of themes and what kind of approach to take. It's about the CEO who will be appointed and the staff, and who will, the idea of this is really to emerge everyone's attitude and to have e-money and payment institutions on table. As regards bank, anyway, we have to admit Lithuanian banks are still the biggest player. They are systematic players. And if there is really bad things happening in their AML things, it's really all the Lithuanians going down. So therefore, maybe the systematic risk and who is having what kind of is, therefore the banks were brought to this, because they are not about only payments products. It's also the AML risk related investments products, credits, just name it, this kind of products. And it's, when we talk about bank, it's a really bigger entity on that.
Okay.
May I just add a quick reaction to what Ruta said? My main point is that even if the banks are the biggest players, and there's no question about that, that's a fact, they still would be able to learn quite a lot from these smaller players. And I think even these lessons, despite the size of EMIs, would help to strengthen their resilience to the risks that you're talking about.
So, okay, just to say that for negotiation table, once again, e-money and payment institutions will be invited, are invited, and will be the same rights to negotiate AML-related tools. So the concept that you are bringing will be taken to the account.
Okay, great to hear that, Ruta. Thanks a lot. So listen, I think we should round up this discussion. I just want to make final few comments because there were a couple of more questions from our viewers. Gabriela was asking about customer funds protection. So it's always good to remember that Bank of Lithuania has published a number of positions, and there is actually a position paper on customer funds protection. So please refer to that. Similarly, there was a question on from Thomas about about the difficulty of opening bank account for fintech companies. And again, there was a quite extensive discussion about this on the market, and there is a position from the Bank of Lithuania published. So please refer to those documents. So with that, I guess I want to thank the organizers for this event. I understand it might be the final event of this year, at least for Rocket. I think we had great discussion, great participants. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and insights, and see you next year. Thank you.
Bye.
Rocket is the key fintech hub in Lithuania, where top creators and founders build the future financial technologies and the next generation of sustainable innovations. Acting as a dynamic ecosystem, we provide space for networking, expertise sharing, and cooperation, enabling and contributing to the success stories of the finance, technology, and innovation sectors. During the past years, our hub has established a leading position as the home of fintech and core place for fintech community.